Hey everyone, this is Christopher Luxon, the former CEO of Air New Zealand.
This is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire.
This is Tracy Ibarra. I'm in Executive Solutions at Dell Technologies.
This is Travis Chappell, founder of Build Your Network. If you are wanting to learn how to embrace change,
To navigate through disruption as a leader,
then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast.
The Leadership is Changing podcast.
the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend,
my very good friend, Denis Giannoutsos.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsos.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to today's Ask Denis freestyle episode. This is where I'm asked a question by our listeners where I share my thoughts, insights, and experiences from working with leaders around the globe. Hey listeners, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing, go ahead and do that. We'd love to see you there, and just wonderful to see the people joining those two different platforms, which is fantastic. Well, if you're wanting to share this podcast, in fact, this episode with 3 other people, that'd be wonderful. Really appreciate you doing that and sharing this with others, because there's so much value and feedback that we're getting from people who are saying how much they really are enjoying these episodes in this podcast, Leadership is Changing. Hey team, I'm also currently at the moment just looking at getting some masks done and some t-shirts done, and then I'll share those with you once I've got those, which is pretty exciting. You know what? 2 weeks ago, I spoke to you as listeners. And if you haven't already checked that out, check out that episode. We talked about the mid-year review. And that is because, we've already gone through the mid-year of this year and of 2021. And now we're looking at where we're going forward for the next 6 months or the second half. Because you see, the whistle is blowing and we've gone into the change rooms. We've gone to do that review. And now we're out back on the field again and we're playing. How's it going, team? How are things progressing for you? I'd love to hear from you on how you're going. How did the first half go for you, and what are you planning to do in this second half of the year? What's quite interesting is that I hear people say to me, oh, you know what, Denis, I want to do all these things, but, I can only do some small things right now. Well, I'm here to tell you that the small things have big impact. And people go, what do you mean it has impact, a small thing? Well, it's actually quite interesting to think about it, but I did hear a quote once about that, and it explains a lot for me and to me, and I'll probably explain some things to you as well. And I've heard various people use this actual quote over times. Dalai Lama and other people I've heard use it as well. And the quote goes along the lines of, if you think you're too small to have an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito in the room. Now you imagine this. If you have a mosquito in the room, and you may have already experienced this, it's not always easy to get to sleep. That little mosquito bzzz in your ear, maybe sort of getting you with its sting and so forth. The mosquito bite can actually be quite terrible. But just to hear that noise around your ear and so forth will keep you up throughout the night. But you think about the size of you as a human being, and you think about the size of the room, and you think about the impact that small mosquito can have on you. It's actually really quite interesting to think about. And that's why I refer to that quote when I talk to people about that, because you see, those small things do make massive impact for sure. A small words like thank you can go a long way with people. You actually giving some people some encouragement, some small encouragement can actually go a long way. A small gesture, providing them some recognition and doing something like that is actually very important. I know that I've actually shared this with you before, but I'm going to share it again now because it's very relevant. You see, I say to leaders all the time, how you come across How you show up makes a difference. Small things like that can make a massive impact on a team, on an employee, on a potential employee, potential client, but also can actually have impact on your stakeholders. I remember this leader one day calling me out from of my peers on the floor, called me into their office. They said to me they love my attitude and the way I'm going, and think I'm going to go a long way. And that's 32 years ago, team, and that conversation, the way it was handled and what was said to me, really did set me up for my career as I'm going forward and so forth. And even though it was 32 years ago, I still remember it today, like it was today, and I still remember what impact it had on me. And so, you as a leader, what you say and what you do and how you come across to people actually does have a lot of sway, impact, and so forth with people for sure. Even when you're looking at going to become fit, match fit, as I say in some other episodes, or even if you're going off to go and do some other work or you're on a project and so forth, I always find that the small things like small amounts of discipline and routines that you might do, some action items which could be quite small, actually result in bigger impact. Even the fact that you, on a small basis, being consistent, if you're doing it once a week, once a day, whatever it is, as long as you're consistent and you keep chipping away at it, you can actually make some massive impact for you, your team, and your organization. The thing here is that I think of another analogy here, or metaphor, team. If you think about a farmer who's on a massive paddock and a big piece of land, and they're wanting to prepare it to sow things and prepare it. So they're going to go through and plow the dirt and plow the land in preparation for having it sowed with plants, fruits, whatever it is, trees, whatever it's going to be. If the person, the farmer, what they try to do is at the other end of the paddock or piece of land, because it could be several acres and so forth, so it's massive, they tend to line up the tractor and they want to stay in line and on line with that other thing across the other side of the paddock. If they move just a few centimeters to the left or to the right, by the time they get to the other end of the paddock and piece of land, there is a massive impact, massive adjustment, even though it's a small amount of turn in the steering wheel on the tractor at the end of the other end of the land. It's a huge amount of impact. It could be meters difference, right? And so the thing here is, if I think about that in life and I think about that in business, a business that makes some tweaks, a leader that makes some tweaks, a leader that actually goes and does some things to actually help himself become more effective, that on day 1 and day 2 and day 3, it may not mean much. But on day 30, and day 90, on day 1 year old and so forth, can make a massive difference for sure. And the thing here is this. It can even come down to what's going through your mind between the ears, your attitude, your mindset, all that. Small things can make a big impact. What are you saying to yourself every single day? What's the words that you're using in your mind when you talk to yourself? Are you using affirmations? They might be small things, but they make a big impact. And I know that for a lot of people today, it's actually understanding on how much of a difference it can make for you going forward for sure. I just know that people that I get to work with, whether it's one-on-one or teams, when I'm coaching them, working with them, the questions I ask to get them to stop and step back and think about things and understand where they want to go, versus them in the reactive mode, whereby every day they run from email to email, meeting to meeting. And I say that in my introduction, because literally that's what leaders are doing every single day. They are running from here to there and so forth. And it's actually quite interesting because I do different activities with teams. And what I do is I put them into activity, but I give them, say, a deadline and I make it a competition. And then my voice is getting louder and faster and louder and faster and louder and faster and louder and faster. And then if I watch the actual body language, if I watch what's going on with that team, it's actually quite interesting. When we do the debrief, the team talked to me about the fact that my voice was getting louder and faster. And then what that meant was their heart rates were getting faster. Their breathing got shallow and they went into the fight-flight mode. And when I do the debrief, we talk about that, and then we talk about what does it actually mean in the real life and how do they work as leaders with their teams. And what comes across team here is that they realize that their language, the way they're saying it and so forth comes across to people that can actually create some stress in others, and then they start to make mistakes. So taking a breath is really important. Now, you and I, we breathe all the time. Of course we're breathing. Well, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you weren't breathing, would you? So the important thing here is that if you can take a breath, but take one that's a little bit longer to sort of relax you, that has major impact later on. And it could have major impact within the hour, but in that day, it could have major impact. And I know that when I think about sporting teams, and I look at a sporting team like the New Zealand All Blacks, that they, when they're playing a game, in the last quarter of an hour, 10 minutes, they really lift the intensity, but the other teams are already quite tired. The reason being is the All Blacks take their time to do different things like a line out and a scrum and so forth. They take their time to keep the energy reserves for later. So the small adjustments that they make at the beginning of the game, throughout the game, make a big difference at the end of the game. So team, I'm going to encourage you to step back and think about what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis? And are those small things that you're doing making major impacts? And are they things that the small things that you're doing actually useful towards the kind of impact that you do want? Because there could be some things that we are doing that are small, but they may not be useful, or they may not be in our interest to have them done, or to get the results that we're getting, because we may want to change the results, which might mean we may need to make some adjustments and do some small things. So today's topic has been along the lines of what can we do by the small things having big impact. The small things have big impact. Team, if there's any coaching that you need, if there's something you want to work through, if there's something small to make a big impact, if there's something you want to get clarity around, then reach out to me, because I would love to coach you and take you through things and help you. It could be about you as a leader going to new levels around your executive presence, your leadership capabilities and skills. It could be you wanting to lead a bigger team. It could also be you thinking about a career change. Do you want to go off and start a business, or maybe buy a business, or go out consulting, something like that? Is it somewhere whereby you wanting to take a similar role, but in another organization? So more than happy to work with you on that too, right? So that's all good. And if you've got teams, and I can come in and help facilitate your teams around team leadership, around the maturity models of the forming, storming, norming, and performing, but more of a team leadership model in the sense of, hey, as a team of leaders, what are we doing to actually move forward and take things from going forward that way? And are we really stepping up as a leadership team? And whether it is anything else around some facilitation you want me to do, some workshops and so forth, anything I can do to help transform your business and your leaders to be able to lead in a disruptive world, then feel free to reach out to me, team. I'm more than happy to help out and work with you for sure. You know, listeners, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group and the LinkedIn page, love to see you there on those platforms. Wonderful group of people joining those different platforms, and so we'd love to see you there. And please share this episode with 3 other people as well, because you see, by you sharing with just 3 people right now, that small thing can make a big impact to this podcast. You see, something small can make a big impact for sure. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Look out for the episodes as they're being released. Download them, have a listen, put a review, and a rating. Please share them with your friends, your family, your network. Hey, if there's any feedback you'd like to give me on the show, or if there's any questions you have for my guests as I interview them, or if you have a question for the Ask Denis Freestyle episode, then send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. All right, listeners, it's always great being with you. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.